The air was thick with tension as I stood frozen, my hand gripping the doorknob tightly. Ethan's voice carried through the walls, muffled yet unmistakable. "It's a real game-changer, this promotion. We should celebrate tonight, just the two of us." My stomach twisted at the suggestive tone, and I felt a knot forming in my throat. As I stepped into the living room, Ethan's eyes widened, his expression a mixture of surprise and guilt. "Meredith, I didn't expect you home so early." "Clearly," I said, my voice laced with a bitterness I could no longer conceal. "Who were you on the phone with?" Ethan's gaze flickered away, and he ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd grown familiar with over the years. "Just a colleague from work," he mumbled, but the lie hung in the air like a thick fog. Before I could press further, the sound of small footsteps echoed down the hallway, and our son, Oliver, appeared as bright with curiosity. "Mom, you're home early," he chirped, oblivious to the tension that crackled between his parents. I forced a smile, determined not to let my suspicions taint Oliver's innocent world. "Yes, sweetheart. Why don't you go play in your room for a bit? I need to talk to your dad about something." Oliver nodded, his gaze shifting between us before he scampered off, his boundless energy a stark contrast to the heaviness that enveloped the room. As soon as his footsteps faded, I turned to Ethan, my heart pounding in my chest. "A promotion? You didn't think to mention that to me?" Ethan's expression hardened, a mask of defensive indifference sliding into place. "It's not a big deal, just a stepping stone, really." "Not a big deal?" I echoed, incredulous. "Ethan, we're supposed to be partners. We share things, remember? Or has that become too much of an inconvenience for you?" He let out a sharp exhale, his jaw clenching. "Don't start with the guilt trips. Meredith, I work hard to provide for this family, and if I don't share every little detail, it's not the end of the world." I recoiled as if he'd slapped me, his dismissive tone cutting deeper than any physical blow. In that moment, I realized our once solid foundation had begun to crumble, the cracks spreading wider with each passing day. As I looked into Ethan's eyes, I saw a stranger staring back at me, a man I no longer recognized, a man who had traded the warmth and affection I'd fallen in love with for a cold, detached demeanor. And in the depths of my heart, I knew that something had irrevocably shifted between us, a chasm that threatened to swallow us whole. I sat on the plush sofa, my fingers tracing the intricate patterns of the hand-stitched quilt draped over the back. This quilt, a treasured heirloom from my late grandmother, held so many memories, of lazy afternoons spent beneath its warmth, her gentle voice narrating tales of our family's history. The house itself had been her parting gift to Ethan and me on our wedding day, a symbol of her unwavering belief in the love we shared. "This is where you'll build your home, your family," she had said, her eyes brimming with tears of joy. "May these walls forever echo with laughter and happiness." How naive I had been, blindly believing that love alone could conquer all. Ethan's betrayal had tainted these once sacred walls, casting long shadows where sunlight used to dance. The sound of the front door slamming jolted me from my reverie, and I steeled myself as Ethan's footsteps approached. He rounded the corner, his expression hardening when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his tone laced with contempt. I met his gaze unflinchingly, my grandmother's quilt serving as a protective talisman. "This is my home, Ethan, or have you forgotten?" His lips curled into a sneer. "Home? This place is nothing but a relic, a constant reminder of the life we'll never have." "And whose fault is that?" I shot back, my voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but another voice cut through the tension, a voice I knew all too well, one that had haunted me since the day I'd met her. Well, if it isn't the pathetic little housewife," Evelyn drawled, sauntering into the room as if she owned the place. Her disdain for me was palpable, a venomous snake coiled and ready to strike. "Mother," Ethan greeted her, his demeanor instantly shifting from hostile to obedient. It sickened me to see how easily he yielded to her manipulations. Evelyn's gaze swept over me, her eyes cold and calculating. "I see you're still clinging to this hovel like a barnacle. Haven't you learned by now? Ethan has outgrown this place, outgrown you." Her words sliced through me like sharpened blades, but I refused to show weakness. This house was a gift from my grandmother, a symbol of the love and trust Ethan and I share. Evelyn threw back her head and laughed, the sound grating and cruel. Love, trust, don't be so foolish, girl. Those concepts are nothing but fairy tales for the weak-minded. Ethan remained silent, his eyes downcast, and in that moment I realized the truth. He was nothing more than a puppet, his strings expertly pulled by the vile woman before me. As Evelyn continued her tirade, spewing venom and false promises of a better life, I clutched the quilt tighter, drawing strength from the memories it held. This house, this sacred refuge, would not be so easily surrendered. If it was a battle she wanted, then a battle she would have, and I would fight with every ounce of my being to protect the home my grandmother had entrusted to me. The air was thick with tension as I stepped into the living room, clutching the crumpled document in my hand. Ethan and Evelyn looked up, their expressions shifting from surprise to wariness. "What's this?" I demanded, thrusting the paper toward them. "Explain this to me." Evelyn's eyes narrowed as she snatched the document from my grasp, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the paper. After scanning the contents, her lips curled into a cruel smirk. "Ah, I see you've discovered our little secret." My heart pounded in my chest as realization dawned. "You're selling the house? Without my consent?" Ethan averted his gaze, his silence deafening. Evelyn, however, seemed to revel in my distress. "Consent?" She let out a mocking laugh. "Don't be so naive, dear. This house, this burden, has held Ethan back for far too long. It's time for him to spread his wings and soar, free from the shackles of your pathetic existence." Her words stung like 1,000 needles, but I refused to back down. "This house belongs to me, too. It was a gift from my grandmother, a symbol of love and trust." "Love?" Evelyn scoffed. "Trust? Don't make me laugh. Those are mere illusions, designed to keep the weak and feeble complacent." I opened my mouth to protest, but she held up a hand, silencing me with a contemptuous glare. "Enough of your whining. The decision has been made. This house will be sold, and the proceeds will be divided fairly. A fresh start for Ethan, away from your suffocating presence." My gaze shifted to Ethan, desperate for him to speak up, to defend our marriage, our family. But he remained silent, his eyes downcast, a mere shadow of the man I had once loved. Rage coursed through my veins, and before I could stop myself, the words tumbled from my lips. "You're nothing but a spineless coward, Ethan. You've let this vile woman twist your mind, turn you against your own wife and child." Evelyn's face contorted with fury, her eyes blazing with contempt. "How dare you speak to me like that, you insolent wretch?" She advanced toward me, her manicured nails clenched like talons. I braced myself for the inevitable assault, but a small voice pierced the tension, halting Evelyn in her tracks. "Mom? Dad? What's going on?" Oliver stood in the doorway, his eyes wide and uncertain, clutching his favorite stuffed bear to his chest. In that moment, everything shifted. The rage that had consumed me dissipated, replaced by a fierce determination to protect my son from the venom that had poisoned our once happy home. I straightened my shoulders and met Evelyn's venomous glare with unwavering resolve. "You can try to tear us apart, but you'll never succeed. This house, this family is mine, and I'll fight with every breath in my body to protect it." Evelyn's lips twisted into a sneer, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, a brief crack in her armor. She had underestimated the depths of a mother's love, and that would be her downfall. As I gathered Oliver into my arms, shielding him from the toxicity that permeated the room, I knew that the battle lines had been drawn. And I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. I sat at the kitchen table, clutching a steaming mug of coffee between my trembling hands. The events of the past few days had left me reeling, my once solid foundation crumbling beneath the weight of Ethan and Evelyn's betrayal. A soft shuffle of footsteps drew my attention, and I looked up to see Oliver standing in the doorway, his brow furrowed with concern. "Mom?" he said hesitantly. "Can I talk to you about something?" I managed a faint smile, beckoning him closer. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Oliver slid into the chair beside me, his small frame dwarfed by the imposing wooden surface. He fidgeted nervously, his gaze flickering between me and the tabletop. I heard Dad and Grandma talking last night," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "They were saying something about selling the house, and that you wouldn't be living with us anymore." My heart clenched at the fear and confusion etched onto his young face. Ethan and Evelyn's selfish actions had not only threatened to tear our family apart, but had also cast a dark shadow over Oliver's innocence. "Oh, honey," I reached out, gently tucking a stray lock of hair behind his ear. "I'm so sorry you had to hear that. I never wanted you to be caught up in this mess." Oliver's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "But why would they want to sell the house? Don't they love us anymore?" His words cut me to the core, and I struggled to find the right explanation, one that wouldn't shatter his fragile trust in his father. "Sometimes," I began, choosing my words carefully, "grown-ups make mistakes. They get caught up in their own problems and forget what's truly important." Oliver nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on mine with an intensity beyond his years. Taking a deep breath, I continued, "But you need to know that none of this is your fault, sweetheart. Your dad and I, we're going through some tough times right now, but that doesn't change how much we love you." A flicker of understanding passed over Oliver's features, and he leaned forward, his small hand covering mine in a gesture of comfort. "I know, Mom," he said solemnly, "and I'm here for you, no matter what." In that moment, my heart swelled with a fierce love and pride for this remarkable child, whose wisdom and compassion far surpassed his tender age. "Thank you, Oliver," I murmured, blinking back tears. "You have no idea how much that means to me." A determined glint shone in his eyes, and he straightened his shoulders, his expression hardening into one of resolve. "We won't let them take our home, Mom," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "We'll fight for it, together." As I gazed into his unwavering stare, I knew that he spoke the truth. With Oliver by my side, I possessed a strength and resilience that Ethan and Evelyn could never comprehend. They might have tried to tear us apart, but we would emerge from this battle stronger and more united than ever before. The air was thick with tension as I sat across from the stern-faced lawyer, her sharp gaze scrutinizing every move I made. I fidgeted nervously, acutely aware of the weight of the situation. "Mrs. Lane," she began, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "I understand the gravity of your situation, but I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you tried to reason with your husband regarding the sale of the property?" I nodded, swallowing hard. "More times than I can count, but he's under the influence of his mother, Evelyn. She's poisoned his mind against me, convincing him that this house is holding him back." The lawyer's brow furrowed, and she made a note on the legal pad before her. "And what about your son? How has he been affected by this conflict?" A lump formed in my throat as I thought of Oliver, his innocent eyes filled with confusion and hurt. He overheard them discussing the sale. He's scared, confused. He doesn't understand why his own father would want to uproot our family like this. The lawyer's expression softened ever so slightly, and she leaned back in her chair, contemplating my words. "I won't sugarcoat this, Mrs. Lane," she said finally. "This will be an uphill battle, especially if your husband has already taken steps to initiate the sale without your consent. However, if we can prove that he forged your signature or acted in bad faith, we may have a case to halt the proceedings." A flicker of hope ignited within me, and I sat up straighter, my resolve strengthening. "I'll do whatever it takes," I declared, my voice unwavering. "This house means everything to me. It's a symbol of the love and trust my grandmother placed in Ethan and me. I won't let them strip that away without a fight." The lawyer nodded, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "That's what I like to hear. Now let's discuss our strategy." As we delved into the intricate details of our plan, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and determination swell within me. For far too long, I had allowed Ethan and Evelyn's manipulations to chip away at my self-worth, but no more. This was my battle to fight, and with the help of this formidable ally, I would emerge victorious. Later that evening, as I sat with my closest friends over cups of steaming coffee, I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude for their unwavering support. "You're doing the right thing, Meredith," Sarah reassured me, her eyes shining with empathy. "That house is a part of you, a piece of your history. Don't let them take that away." Emily nodded in agreement, reaching across the table to give my hand a reassuring squeeze. "We're here for you, every step of the way. Just say the word, and we'll rally the troops." As I looked around the table at these incredible women, their loyalty and love shining like beacons in the darkness, I knew that I was no longer alone in this fight. With their strength bolstering my own, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, no matter how daunting. Ethan and Evelyn might have thought they could break me, but they had gravely underestimated the power of a woman scorned. I would not go down without a battle, and when the dust settled, they would rue the day they ever crossed me. The air in the stuffy conference room was thick with tension as I took my seat beside my lawyer, my heart pounding in my chest. Across the table, Ethan and Evelyn sat, their expressions a mix of smugness and disdain. "Well, well," Evelyn sneered, her painted lips curling into a cruel smile. "If it isn't the little housewife clinging to her delusions of grandeur." Before I could respond, the door opened and a familiar figure strode in. The real estate agent who had been working with Ethan and Evelyn on the sale of the house. Her jaw was set in a grim line, and she carried a thick folder tucked under her arm. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her tone clipped and professional. "I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but Evelyn merely scoffed. "And what, pray tell, might that be?" The agent fixed her with a steely gaze, unflinching. "The fact that you've been operating under false pretenses, attempting to sell a property without the full consent of both owners." A hush fell over the room as she placed the folder on the table and slid it toward Evelyn. "I have here documented proof that Mrs. Lane's signature on the sales agreement was forged, a felony offense punishable by law." Evelyn's face drained of color, but she quickly regained her composure, her eyes narrowing. "That's a bold accusation," she spat. "Do you have any evidence to support such a ludicrous claim?" The agent's lips curved into a thin smile. "As a matter of fact, I do." She opened the folder, revealing a stack of documents and photographs. Handwriting analysis, witness statements, and surveillance footage all point to one undeniable truth. You committed fraud in an attempt to illegally sell this property. Ethan's eyes widened, and he turned to Evelyn, his expression a mixture of shock and betrayal. "Mother, what did you do?" Evelyn's mask of indifference crumbled, and she slammed her fist on the table, her face contorted with rage. "Don't play the innocent, you spineless worm! You were more than willing to go along with my plan until your pathetic excuse for a wife got in the way." My lawyer cleared her throat, drawing the attention back to her. "I think it's clear what needs to happen here. Unless you want to face criminal charges for fraud and forgery, you'll immediately halt all proceedings regarding the sale of this property." Evelyn opened her mouth to protest, but the agent held up a hand, silencing her. "I've already notified the proper authorities and shared the evidence with them. Any further attempts to sell this house will result in immediate legal action." For a moment, the room was deathly silent, the weight of the situation hanging in the air like a thick fog. Finally, Evelyn slumped back in her chair, defeated. "Fine," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over." As she stormed out of the room, Ethan hesitated, his gaze meeting mine for the first time. In his eyes, I saw a flicker of something. Regret, perhaps, or shame. But before I could discern its meaning, he turned and followed his mother, leaving me to savor the sweet taste of victory. Later that evening, as I sat on the porch swing, gently rocking back and forth, Oliver emerged from the house and joined me, nestling into my side. "Is it over, Mom?" he asked, his voice tinged with cautious hope. I wrapped my arm around him, pulling him close. "Yes, sweetheart, we won. The house is safe." A wide grin spread across his face, and he let out a whoop of joy, throwing his arms around me in a fierce hug. As I held him close, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo, I felt a profound sense of relief and gratitude wash over me. Against all odds, we had prevailed, our bond as mother and son stronger than ever. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges the future held, we would face them together. A united front, unbreakable and unshakable. The aftermath of the failed house sale was like a wildfire, burning through Ethan and Evelyn's lives with a scorching intensity. News of their deceitful actions spread like wildfire, fueled by the damning evidence and eyewitness accounts. Within days, Ethan's once promising career at the firm lay in tatters, his promotion and reputation reduced to ash. Whispers of his unethical behavior echoed through the hallways, and he found himself shunned by colleagues who had once fawned over his success. How could you do something so despicable, Ethan? His boss had demanded during the tense termination meeting. You've not only betrayed the trust of this company, but also that of your own family. We cannot tolerate such a breach of integrity. Ethan had sat in stunned silence, his mouth agape, unable to muster a defense against the onslaught of condemnation raining down upon him. As for Evelyn, her fall from grace was even more spectacular. The once revered socialite found herself the subject of vicious gossip and scathing whispers, her former friends turning their backs on her in disgust. I always knew there was something off about that woman, one of her so-called friends remarked during a charity luncheon. But to stoop so low as to forge legal documents, utterly despicable. Evelyn, undeterred by the mounting criticism, had lashed out in her typical venomous manner. You're all just a bunch of envious harpies, bitter that I had the guts to take what I wanted. Her outburst had only served to further ostracize her, and within weeks she found herself isolated, her once coveted social circle reduced to a barren wasteland. In a desperate attempt to salvage her rapidly deteriorating situation, Evelyn had turned on her own son, demanding that he stand by her side and fight against the injustice they had suffered. Ethan, however, had finally seen the truth. His mother's manipulative ways had not only cost him his job and his reputation, but had also nearly destroyed his family. With a newfound resolve, he had severed ties with her, leaving Evelyn to fend for herself. You're on your own, Mother, he had declared, his voice devoid of emotion. I won't be a pawn in your twisted games any longer. Evelyn's reaction had been swift and volatile, a torrent of vicious insults and threats hurled at her son as he walked away, leaving her to wallow in the wreckage of her own making. As the dust settled and the smoke cleared, it became evident that the once formidable duo of Ethan and Evelyn had been reduced to mere shadows of their former selves, their hubris and deceit ultimately leading to their downfall. And through it all, I stood tall, a silent witness to the karmic retribution that had befallen them. There was a part of me that felt a twinge of satisfaction in watching their carefully constructed facade crumble, a just punishment for the pain and turmoil they had inflicted upon my family. Yet, as I looked back on the battle that had raged, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sorrow as well. For all their sins, they were still human, flawed and misguided, victims of their own greed and selfishness. As I gazed out at the quiet street, the warmth of the setting sun casting a golden glow over the neighborhood, I knew that this chapter of our lives was finally closed. The path ahead might be uncertain, but one thing was clear. We had emerged from the fire, tempered and stronger than ever before. The months following the confrontation with Ethan and Evelyn were a whirlwind of change and transformation. As the dust settled and the fallout subsided, I found myself standing at a crossroads. One path leading back to the life I had known, the other beckoning me forward into the unknown. It was Ethan who made the first move, showing up on my doorstep one rain-swept evening, his eyes downcast and his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Meredith," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to say, except I'm sorry, truly, deeply sorry for the pain I've caused you and Oliver." I regarded him silently, my heart a tempest of conflicting emotions. A part of me yearned to forgive him, to welcome him back into our lives with open arms. But the wounds he had inflicted ran too deep, the scars still raw and aching. "Your words mean nothing to me, Ethan," I said, my tone firm yet devoid of malice. "Actions speak louder, and yours have made it clear that you no longer value this family." He flinched as if struck, but I pressed on, determined to have my say. "You allowed your mother to manipulate you, to twist your mind against your own wife and child. That is unforgivable." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "The divorce will proceed, and I will retain full custody of Oliver." Ethan's shoulders sagged, and he opened his mouth as if to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "This is not up for debate, Ethan. You made your choice, and now you must live with the consequences." In the end, he left without a fight, his spirit broken and his pride in tatters. As I watched his retreating figure disappear into the night, I felt a strange sense of melancholy. Not for the loss of our relationship, but for the man he had once been, the man I had loved and chosen to build a life with. But even as one chapter closed, another was just beginning. With Ethan's departure, I found myself embracing a newfound sense of freedom and purpose. I traded my part-time library job for a full-time position, reveling in the opportunity to immerse myself in the world of books and knowledge. And as my professional life blossomed, so too did my personal growth. Emboldened by my experiences, I started a blog dedicated to single motherhood, pouring my heart and soul into each word. To my surprise and delight, it quickly gained a devoted following, becoming a source of inspiration and solace for women navigating the same treacherous waters. Through it all, Oliver remained my constant companion, his unwavering love and support a beacon in the storm. Together, we embarked on a journey of healing and self-discovery, refurbishing the house that had once been a battleground and transforming it into a true home, a sanctuary filled with laughter, love, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. As I sat on the freshly painted porch, watching Oliver chase butterflies through the newly landscaped garden, I couldn't help but marvel at the resilience of the human spirit. We had endured the unthinkable, emerged from the ashes of betrayal and deceit, and come out stronger on the other side. And in that moment, bathed in the warm embrace of the late afternoon sun, I knew that our story, my story, was far from over. It was merely the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with endless possibilities and the promise of a future written on our own terms.